Hello there, it is Jo from Minerva. I hope this video finds you well. Today I'm doing a fun little video on how to use Ric Rac. You might have nostalgic memories of Ric Rac from the 1970s. I'm a 1970s child and I absolutely love this stuff. But sometimes you can just see it as something that you stick on top of something, and then if that's not the style that you're after, you can't really think of what else to do with it. So I'm going to show you a few different things that you can do, some fun projects, some different ways to apply it, and what happens if you use different thicknesses. I'm wearing the Megan Nielsen Sudley top, which is the short sleeved version with the Peter Pan collar. It has the back tie, but you can wear this top the other way around. There are not darts in the front. There are no darts at all, so you can wear it with this side facing or the other side facing. And I added a little bit of extra detail by having the Ric Rac between the two collar layers. I'll show you how to do that, but there's also some other simple things that you can do if you want to have a play around with Ric Rac. Ric Rac comes in different gauges. So you can get a really small one like this, which is good for adding little details, or you can also get really jumbo ones like this, and there's lots of fun things that you can use this for, because even if you sew this along the centre line, you can gain a little bit of length in something. So this would be great if you've got a pair of jeans that are a little bit too short, and if you put this around the inside hem, you would get yourself an extra ½ centimetre. We'll start with the simple things first. So I'll show you a few ways to apply Ric Rac, and then we'll move on to how to use it in more sophisticated ways. This is my Sudley top. I have the Ric Rac sandwiched in between my collar, but I'm thinking that I'd like to continue to add the Ric Rac theme around this blouse. So I've got some more of the same gauge, and the simplest way to use Ric Rac is to just sew it on top of your garment, so you get the sort of full wave. I've turned the sleeve up with just a straight hem. It's overlocked on the inside, so there's not a lot of bulk there, because we're going to add a little bit more bulk with the Ric Rac. And I'm going to use the line of the hem as a guide for putting on the Ric Rac, and when I'm sewing, I'm going to be aiming to sew down the centre line of the Ric Rac. Now, if I sew down the centre, I will have a continuous piece of fabric to sew on. If I slip to one side, I'll keep hitting a hole or a little hole wave. So I need to sew straight down the centre. I'm going to start at the underarm, and I'm not going to fold the end over. If you've got a larger one that's fraying, you can put a little bit of fray stop on the end if that helps it to stop fraying. But when I get back round from the sleeve circumference, I will just forwards and back on the end, because I don't want a lump there and another lump, because it will be too chunky under my arm. So I'm going to put it on flat, and I'm not going to pin it on. If you pin it on, it sort of gets a little bit of a hump in it, and by the time you get round to the end, you will have been straightening it out anyway. If you're sewing a small circumference, and you can remove the front extension table from your machine, that helps, and we can sew this on flat to the garment. At the end, I haven't cut it off yet. I got all the way around to the end. Then I pivoted the work, put my zigzag really close. It's on 0.8 or 0.5. And then I've just done a little row of satin stitch there, really close zigzag, to finish off the end. If you think it's not going to fray, you can just sew straight along. If you use a nylon Ric Rac, that tends to fray a little bit more, so you might want to put a little bit of fray stop. If you give this a press, you'll get a really harmonious hem. And that is how you apply Ric Rac as an outer decoration. If you've got a skirt, say an A-line denim skirt, So you can use different colours of Ric Rac and line them up. So you could do some rows like this. You could add different ribbons to get a really folksy look, or you can try adding different gauges of Ric Rac, and these are all the same method of application, so you're just going to sew down the centre. This style of decoration can also be used in homeware, so if you're making makeup bags, sponge bags, lunchbox bags, totes, anything like that, you can use this as a decoration with that technique there for surface design. Here's a really lovely example here. One of the advantages of using Ric Rac as a top decoration is that it can go around curves really easily because of the gaps in between. So you can curve the Ric Rac. So if you want to use it as a top decoration, for example, on the top of a collar, you can get it to go around curves much easier than you can, say, if you were going to decorate with a piece of ribbon, because you don't have any outer fabric to ease in. It can just go around a curve. You could actually even steam that under your steam iron so that you've got a bit of a curve to start with, but it doesn't affect the pattern too much. The more you curve it, the more you lose the evenness of the little bumps. So now these holes are smaller than these holes, but you can manipulate it quite a lot for top decoration. I've seen it used as a sort of applique motif, so a piece like this, maybe in green, and then leaves made with it, because you can obviously get that curve shape. So it could be used sort of trailing up the side of a skirt, especially those sort of embroidered folksy style skirts. You can braid Ric Rac, so you can get two pieces and interlock them together, and when you sew down the centre it makes a really firm piece of braid. You can use that to decorate the front of cardigan coats or coatigans, or you can use it as a strap on a sundress. You can braid Ric Rac, so I'm using the jumbo one just so that you can see it, and I haven't cut it because I can use this piece of Ric Rac for something else if I keep it a better length. So you can interlock the wavy shapes. You can get a really nice braid. You can use this for decorating on top of something, or if you stitch down the centre and hold the plait together, you can also use them as straps. If you give that a steam, and then you can sew down the centre, and you get this really nice sort of plaited, twisted braid. Isn't that beautiful? It's also super cute if you mix two colours together. Really nice for edging maybe a baby quilt, or sort of any kind of gift wear. It's really pretty. Next up, I'm going to have a go at making a little brooch. So I'm going to use some Ric Rac, and I'm going to hand sew and try and get that sort of rose feature, and then you can put a brooch pin on the back and you've got a nice decoration for your coat or lapel. If you use pieces of denim or patches of interface denim, because the Ric Rac goes really well around a curve, it makes a really nice frame for a little piece of embroidery. So you could do a little embroidered motif here or a little mandala, and then you can put a brooch pin on the back. I've attached that Ric Rac with a navy bobbin thread in the bottom and some invisible thread in the top, so that's not hand stitched round. I sewed that on the machine. So that's another little brooch decoration that you can use. If you fancy some hand sewing, then we can use this larger, you can use small Ric Rac, but I'm just using the larger one so that I can show you the technique because it's just a bit easier to see. So you need a piece of round felt. I'm just using that little piece of denim that I showed you a minute ago. Just with some tacking stitches, hand stitches, you can keep moving the Ric Rac around. The jumbo one works particularly well because it's so big, you get a sort of little petal curve with that. So you just keep sewing the Ric Rac on in concentric circles. You can shape it a little bit at the end, so as long as you're just attaching them on. And this is a nice way to play around with Ric Rac if you're not quite in the style groove for having it directly on your clothes. You can use it as a corsage on a handbag or on a denim jacket. It looks pretty great. But you can see already I'm getting a flower shape. Just want to be a bit more careful with that one on the end because I want that to cover up the folded down one. And now I can keep moving in. So these bumps are now in between these bumps. I used to make lots of these for teachers' gifts when my children were little, and every teacher absolutely loved them. You can mix this up with different colours, so you could use different colours in different layers. It looks very different with a small Ric Rac. This one looks a bit more sort of a rose peony shape, whereas if you use the smaller Ric Rac you get more of a sort of frilly carnation shape. Keep moving into the centre. You can either use a piece of Ric Rac that can continuously keep going into the middle, or you can add a button centre, or you can make a real bud shape to go in the middle. So this time we're going to use a piece of the Ric Rac, but really roll it up. So you get that sort of bud in the middle. You will need to let the bud out a little bit. You can put your thumb in the centre because if you just roll it like a tube, it will just stand up too tall. So you want to try and get some folds. It's pretty messy sewing. It's just catching any kind of fold that holds the shape. Nothing too complicated. It's not a particular embroidery stitch or anything. It's just catching the threads in the Ric Rac so that you can force the bumps into the correct positions. If you want to put the coiled centre in rather than a button, then you can put that in, and I've got my original single thread here, so I can come straight up through the centre and straight back down, and I can use any stitches to anchor any petals that are popping up. Or fold any in that are lying a little bit too flat. Just see a raw edge there. I'm just going to catch that and fold it back into the centre. There we go. You can secure it on the back. And pop it on a brooch pin. I've taken some little sections from how I put the Peter Pan collar on the Sudley blouse, so you'll see me wearing something different, but I just took some extra frames when I was putting this collar on so that I could show you the details of how to get the Ric Rac between the collar pieces. If you want to use Ric Rac to create a collar edge, so here you will get the little bumps sticking up around the edge of your collar, then you're going to sandwich the Ric Rac and you're going to sew just as we did before when we just simply applied it. So we're aiming to get that line through the centre. The only problem is we're doing this blind now because when we put the undercollar on, we're covering up and we can't see where that centre line of the Ric Rac is. So this is all about accuracy. So this has been tacked on so that when I take a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way round, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch foot so that I can be super accurate and run this along the raw edge, I will be getting my stitch line right where I need it. It will be landing in that centre line position. So this is the top collar. It's got the Ric Rac on. This is my under collar, which is slightly smaller. I'm going to line up the raw edges, but I need to be a bit more accurate than I normally would because I can't have this piece drifting away. Otherwise, when I sew, I won't be hitting the centre point of the Ric Rac. Now we're going to sew with our 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay, I've sewn this at a 1/4 inch, but I want to show you what's happened, and I know it's wrong, which is why I did it to show you. If you turn it out and not enough of the Ric Rac is poking out, you can get a very disappointing result. So I'm going to use that line that I've sewn, and actually I did it with a 4mm stitch length because I know I'm going to be taking it out. So now I can sew at an 1/8, and that will mean that this is all held down really securely, and I can use that line to guide me for one that's even closer to the raw edge. And then we'll take a look at how much Ric Rac is showing on our next pass. I'm putting this down to my normal stitch length because I know this is going to be right. So now I'm using the 1/8 part of the foot. I'm running that along my basting line, and I'll be getting much closer to the raw edge, but without the raw edge sliding away or chewing up. So now you can see I have my basting line, which is my 4mm machine stitch, and my one that's much closer to the edge. Now I can take out that basting stitch, the machine one, because that's done its job. It's held the raw edges really close together. This time we're getting the desired effect, so we're getting the Ric Rac sandwich between the two layers. We hand tacked it on, then we machined ourselves a guideline, and then we got 1/8. It depends how big your Ric Rac is. I only needed 1/8 because it's a small piece of Ric Rac. The bigger the waves, the bigger your seam allowance and placement will need to be. When you turn it out to the right side, you should have an even amount of the Ric Rac showing. You can trim out the raw edge if you've got any left. Pinking shears are good because that's like clipping the seam over and over again, so it gives a really good curve. That's been steamed and pressed, and you can see it's a really even collar. You can use this Ric Rac technique anywhere, so you can use it on cuffs, you can use it on collars, you can use it down the sides of button stands, but you need to make sure that you find that halfway point, and if you're sewing it blind, you need to get it attached first and then get your accuracy on the second pass. Whatever Ric Rac gauge you use, you must take into account your seam allowances so that your collars meet at the front and you also get the seam allowance at your back opening. I overlocked the bottom of this blouse and actually I wore it for a day at home to see what length I would like it, and I kept it long so that I could tuck it in, but I found that I didn't want it tucked in, but it was too long to have hanging out. So I'm going to take up the bottom of this shirt, which is turning out to be a Ric Rac sample shirt slowly, and I'm going to show you another method, which is how to have the scallops of the Ric Rac hanging down. It will add the same style as around the neckline, but it can hang from the hem. Now I'm going to use a jumbo one, so it's not all going to quite match up, but I'm kind of happy with a bit of a mashup of a top, and I'll show you how to apply this with top stitching so that you can use it along a hem. I've repressed up my hem so I've got it the correct length that I would like, and with this press line running around my hem, I'm going to use that as a guide for placing my Ric Rac. I'd like to start on the back, and I'm going to match these dips up with the crease. I'm going to do that all the way round, sew it on so that when I turn, the little humps will hang down. I can then top stitch along the bottom to hold that in place. This is quite a floppy blouse, and actually when I'm wearing it, it sort of gets stuck to the back of my jeans and stuck to my bottom. So this bit of Ric Rac will give this floaty fabric a little bit of extra weight so that the hem hangs really nicely. And then I think I'm going to be quite happy just sewing on the machine as I go. Do you remember that we didn't finish the end off? Well, what you need to try and do now is to match up that wavy shape so that your wave continues back into that wave shape, because this is such a thick Ric Rac that you can't really double it over, so you need to be covering over the previous shape, and then you can either use fray stop to stop it fraying, or you can do that little zigzag that I showed you in the previous technique. But because we've blended in the wave shape, we have continuous bumps. Just got a little bit there, might just pop some fray stop on there. Okay, next step is to press that to the wrong side. There we are, that's the effect that you get. Obviously you don't need to use a really jumbo Ric Rac, but it does look particularly good in that. As I said in the intro, actually, it's quite a good way of adding another inch to jeans. I made the Dawn jeans and I wore them for winter with boots and they were great, but then when I wanted to wear them with sandals in the summer, they were a touch too short. So I put a row of this around the bottom of my jeans and it looked fab. Okay, we need to stop this flopping back down. So now we're going to take a really close, now this is the difference between top stitch and edge stitch. We're going to take a really close edge stitch along here so that it stops this from flipping back out. I'd like to do my edge stitch at 1/8 of an inch, which is really small, so I'm going to use my 1/4 inch foot, and I'm going to use the slimmer side as a guide so that when I run that along there, I'm getting really close to the edge. If you've got a pattern fabric, you might want to just top stitch further up, but because I've got a plain fabric, I want to edge stitch really close to the edge. Okay, here it is edge stitched down. You can see I've got really close to the edge. It's a really pretty hem finish. That just needs a press. Okay, I've well and truly Ric Rac this blouse to show you the 3 different techniques. I've got the sandwich technique here in between the collars. I've got the on top decoration on the sleeve, and I have the top stitched hanging Ric Rac around the bottom. And actually you can see now that the weight of that Ric Rac around the bottom is holding this blouse down, and it's stopping it from sticking to my bottom as a hanging out shirt. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. It's been a little bit of fun. If Ric Rac is something that's fell off your radar, you might want to pick it up and take a look. Do head over to our website. All the products that I've used are listed below. You can use the hashtag Ric Rac and you'll find how other people and other Minerva makers have been using it. We would like to see what you've been making, Ric Rac or otherwise. So you can make a free account with us, share your makes and take a look at all of the sewing inspiration from our Minerva makers. Thank you very much for watching. Do call again soon.